Welcome, everyone. My name is Robin Lucas. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Grassroots Advocacy Manager here at AAUW. I want to kick off today's webinar first with a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website in the next few days. I want to direct folks, if they have any technical questions, please drop them in the chat function, and AAUW staff will be happy to assist. But if you have questions about the substance of today's webinar, please drop them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many of the questions as possible at the end of the webinar during our Q&A section. So again, thank you for joining us today. AAUW members and experienced advocates will explore how to engage with our elected officials. So I would like to welcome Barbara Price, co-chair of the AAUW Public Policy Committee, and Becky Gall, chair of the AAUW Lobby Corps. Throughout today's webinar, they will provide an overview of ways to engage, steps to guide you, and then they and two more members of AAUW's Lobby Corps will share a few of their experiences before we open for questions at the end. So with that introduction, I will hand it over to you, Barbara and Becky.
Thank you, Robin. And we're glad that so many of you are able to join us. Next slide. So AAUW has always been political, but never has been partisan. We have a long history of creating social change through public policy efforts, like endorsing legislation. Political work can be characterized by shared values, working toward a common goal that is best for the community. AAUW takes political stands and influences public debate on critical issues based on the values in the members' adopted public policy priorities. Put simply, being political is a way to influence legislation and regulation through government or public affairs. Being nonpartisan, AAUW will work with any policymaker from any party who cares about our issues and shares our goals. AAUW's public policy priorities were reviewed by the Association Public Policy Committee and presented for member comment in January. The proposed priorities are open for membership vote right now, with May 15th as the deadline to vote. AAUW's basic issue areas are to support a strong system of higher education, of public education that promotes gender fairness, equity, diversity, and inclusivity, and to address the barriers and implicit biases that hinder the advancement of women and girls, achieve economic security for all women, guarantee equality, individual rights, and social justice for a diverse, inclusive society. You can find our information on our website under resources about political versus partisan guide. Next slide. AAUW uses lobbying and grassroots efforts to push forward policies that address educational and economic barriers for women. The basic activities of grassroots lobbying, which is when we as constituents seek to engage our elected officials to impact their decision-making, are meeting in person, calling, or writing. In person is the most effective way to influence your legislator, whether it is in their local office or in the Capitol. Phone calls are appropriate when a vote is scheduled and you are asking the legislator to vote a certain way. Email can also be used when a vote is scheduled or you are asking for their support of a particular bill. Something that's really important to know is that 94% of congressional staff say that constituent visits to the legislator's office have influence on undecided legislators more than any other strategy. But calling or writing is absolutely impactful. Offices keep running tallies of calls in support or opposition to a bill or an issue. Another important thing to take note of is to make sure before you do any lobbying, if you're employed, that your employer doesn't restrict lobbying. Next slide. So this is a real quick and simple way of remembering about lobbying and an easy approach to how to do it. We call this the 3H approach to lobbying. Head, this is the information you provide about the issue you want to discuss. That is fact-based and on research and or reports. AAUW has lots of information on their website where you can explore the issues of education, workplace and economic equity, find research and data, and where we stand in the Policy Center. Heart, this is your opportunity to tell a story about someone who has been affected by the issue you wish to raise with your legislator. Hand, this is a few sheets of information to leave behind about the issue you have raised, such as AAUW Quick Facts, research, or the AAUW Public Policy Brochure. You can attach a business card to this material to remind them of who left the information. Now I'll turn it over to Becky, who will give you some more very detailed approaches to engaging with your elected officials. Becky?
Good afternoon. I'm going to expand a bit on what Barbara has already said. So next slide, please. The key thing is you always need to have an ask for your legislator. You're asking your legislator to do something and do something specific, and you want that to be a very concise ask, because legislators definitely have limited time and attention spans. So you want to make this as easy as possible for them when you visit. So you're going to be asked, you have a couple of different things that you can use as your ask. You can ask your legislator to support a specific issue, whether you ask them to commit to engaging through legislation, you want them to build support with their colleagues, you want them to speak often on the issue and publicly share information on that issue. Another thing you could do is to ask them to write a bill on a specific issue or to co-sponsor a bill that another legislator has already written. That's helpful early on in the steps on a specific process. And if you are asking for co-sponsorships, you need to be sure that you know who the author is and who is already signed on as a co-sponsor. A third thing that you could do that we often did as Lobby Corps members, we would ask the legislator to specifically vote yes or vote no on a specific piece of legislation, whether it's a vote in committee or a vote when it's actually on the floor of the legislator. One thing to remember is that it's very difficult to lobby on multiple issues in a single visit. It's much better to just have a single, simple ask for any kind of legislative visit. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay. Here's a little more expansion on the things that we've already talked about. This may seem like an intimidating chart with an awful lot of information on it, but it's really very straightforward. So first, you have to plan your meeting, which is basically doing your research and knowing the issue, the why and the background on your position. However, just remember that you don't have to be an expert on an issue to lobby on it. We're going to talk more about AAUW resources for doing this research, but I'll just mention that there's plenty of information on the AAUW website and quick facts that you can use to help to develop your talking points for a visit. Part of your research should be to know the legislator's visit on the issue. Do you know whether they're a supporter? Do you know whether they've ever used this issue as a priority? And you also want to know if they have any links to this particular issue that you're asking about, whether they're on a committee that's working on this. Have they sponsored or co-sponsored similar issues in similar pieces of legislation in the past? You also want to be familiar with your legislator's particular background. What's his education? Where did he go to school? What's his profession when he is not legislating? Where in particular do they live? Do they have any special interests? Because it's always better if you can make some kind of connection to the legislator. Whether you live in the district, you went to the same school, you're involved in a similar organization, and you also want to make sure that you mention your connections to the community, that you're speaking for AAUW members in the legislators community. So personal connections goes a long way towards building the relationships that you want to do with legislatures when we ask them for support. You also need to consider the timing of your visit. What's happened recently? What's actually going on this issue and any legislation? Is this the right time to visit on an issue? You don't want to come up to be out of step with what's actually happening. You might think about meeting back in the district when the legislation is not in session. And I'll also remember that a few clear sentences may be all you need and all you'll be given time for. And you want to be sure that you practice those sentences before the actual meeting. So during the actual meeting itself, you want to bring something that has your talking points on it. And you always want to have some kind of material to leave behind that states the AAUW position on the issues. During the meeting itself, like I said, be ready with a clear, very concise ask, and be aware that you may not end up meeting with the actual legislator themselves. You may end up meeting with a staff person, whether that is a person that's in charge of that particular issue or just anyone who is working for them. And don't be disappointed if that happens, because the legislator staffer is critical to helping the legislator develop a position on an issue. And it's very important they provide advice to their bosses. Again, during the meeting, make sure that you remind them that you are not speaking just for yourself. You're speaking for AAUW members in their district. And you can also, during the visit, you can remind them of AAUW branches that are in their legislative district, getting that information from your state AAUW public policy people. If you don't already know about it, you can cite some general numbers of, how many AAUW members are in their district, if you can have that information. Another thing that's very important during a meeting is to share any kind of story that you can come up with about the impact of the particular issue on either you personally, someone in your family, someone you know, because the stories make it much easier for the legislator to connect with your issue and why you've taken the position and why you think it's important. Don't be afraid to say that you don't know the answer to specific questions, but if you do come up with that situation, make note of it so that you can follow up afterwards and come up with an answer. And also be sure that you listen. Don't do all the talking. You're there to hear what the legislator has to say, to learn what their position is. And if they have a different position, you want to listen to what they're saying on why they don't support the issue or what their questions are. Just be sure to listen. Don't argue. Then after the meeting, you want to make sure that you follow up and answer any questions that you couldn't answer, or if you promise to provide some resources that AAUW can provide, be sure that you do that to let them know that AAUW can be a resource on our priority issues, that we have information that may help them make a decision or to convince others that our positions are good. Again, then You can send a follow-up note to say thank you. If you ask them to co-sponsor, check to see if they did that and refer to that in your thank you. And last but not least, be sure to complete an AAUW lobbying report to share the results of your meeting, whether you're sharing it just with your branch or you're sharing it with your your state public policy people, or AAUW National is always interested to hear about interactions that any AAUW members nationwide have had with their legislators. So we can go to the next slide. This slide is just a little bit more about some of those AAUW resources that you can find on the National AAUW website. These are two things, some issue papers and AAUW quick facts that are easily available if you look on the Policy Center web pages. You will find links to PDF versions of these files that you can easily print off to have one-page handouts that you can print to use for your own research and to share with whoever you visit on AAUW's positions. So they are critical information, and there's a wealth of information there. And it is useful to read through these thoroughly and to get familiar with all the terms that are used for various issues, because using terms like earned leave instead of paid sick days can help broaden the appeal for our issues. So that's it for me for the moment. So I'm going to turn it back over to Barbara for the next slide. Go ahead to next slide and back to Barbara.
So we have we've covered a lot of information in this webinar, and a lot of it is outlined in a piece on AAUW's website, how to meet with elected officials. And Robin will put the link in the chat so you can see that. But you can see here, it covers a whole range of issues like requesting the visit, preparing for the visit, and tips and tricks, and what do you do after the visit, and even if you're just dropping by. Be sure to fill out the form, report back form after you've done your visit, and take pictures, send pictures. You can use them in your state website. AAUW can post them on their website, and also in a lot of other information that goes out to highlight what you've been able to do. And then, you know, you can also send it to your state public policy person or your state president. Next slide. And I'm handing it back over to Becky.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. This slide is a picture of me and another fellow member of Lobby Corps back in 2017, lobbying Senator Richard Shelby, Republican from Alabama, on Capitol Hill. So I am just going to share a little bit of information with you about the AAUW Action Fund Capitol Hill Lobby Corps that I have been lucky enough to participate in for the last 10 years or so. And I'm going to briefly give you an overview of our lobbying process that we as AAUW members have been using. And then I'm going to turn over to some very experienced members of Lobby Corps to just share a little bit about their experiences lobbying with AAUW. So, like I said, what is Capitol Hill Lobby Corps? It is members of AAUW in the Metro Washington, D.C. area. We are branches in Northern Virginia, close in Maryland, and the DC branch itself, and also a few national members that joined us, that we live close enough to Capitol Hill that we can actually physically get there. And we have been, Lobby Corps has been in existence for almost 40 years, representing AAUW members nationwide by doing in-person lobbying in Senate and House representative offices, talking to staff about AUW priority issues. We met regularly in person, and have gotten ourselves known for doing lobbying on a recurring basis for such a long time, and are thought of and well respected for what we call the 3 Ps. We're prepared, we're polite, and we are persistent. We are known for having information to back up our positions, and we are always polite, no matter whether we agree or disagree with what the legislator speaks to us. And also because we don't represent any highly paid special interests. We are volunteer lobbyists representing their constituents, and we come up there on a regular basis. We're not kids in t-shirts. We're not holding big signs. We are up there to talk about our issues and to explain why we've taken the positions and why we want them to consider supporting these issues, so that some positive actions can come up from that. So that's key. So let me just quickly review the process, which you will see follows the steps that I talked about in that chart earlier. We met often when Congress was in session. AUW national office staff would pick a specific issue for us to lobby on based on what was actually going on Capitol Hill, whether the piece of legislation was in committee, whether it was coming up for a vote, whether we were looking for co-sponsors. But public policy staff would provide the issue of the day to share with the 20, 30, 40 members of Lobby Corps, so that we could prepare ourselves and do the research. Then we would actually meet in the cafeterias on Capitol Hill on either the Senate or the House side. They are public office buildings, at least they were easily open to anybody to just walk in. If you went through security, any of you can go visit your legislator when you happen to be in Washington these days. They're public office buildings. So we then meet in the cafeteria. We would review the issue to make sure that everybody who was lobbying that day was very clear on what the ask of the day was, clarify any questions to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And then we would pair up. We would always do our visits in pairs, so no one was alone. We were always sure to identify ourselves as AUW members. We always had name tags, and we were always ready to have our AUW elevator speech, because often people may not be familiar with AUW. Oh, what's AUW? You want to be able to say in 2 quick sentences, what's AUW? Who are they? Are you all people who work for universities? It's like, nope, we are educated women, 170,000 members and supporters across the US who are working for education and equity for women and girls. And then just go on from there. And people would often tell you, oh, I know about AUW, or my neighbor was a member, or, I've met AUW members in my district. But you always got to be ready. So we would ask to speak to someone on the issue, act to speak to the senator, act to speak to the representative, but then be happy to speak to their legislative aide, anyone on their staff, or even just the receptionist, because on Capitol Hill, you never know. Last year's receptionist may be the chief of staff next year. They may be someone who is very familiar with the issue, be ready to speak with everybody. And then we always would leave our ask letter and some information to link to AUW, so that if there's any follow-up needed, they would know where to find us. Okay, and then always remember to take a picture with the legislator. They're more than happy to take a picture when they talk to somebody, but it's always good to have that as a record, and leave a note of some kind. And always we would follow up with national AUW staff to tell them the results of our visit, whether the legislator was supportive, whether he had questions, what his objections are, things that he wanted to know more about, so that we could follow up with them. So I am going to then now turn my microphone over to Marcy and Mary Lou, who have been lobbying with me and for AAUW on Capitol Hill for more than 10 years, let's say, each of them. And just to share a little bit about their experiences, about what it's really like, and things that they would like other people to know about lobbying for AAUW. So thank you. I'll turn the microphone over.
Hi. My name is Marcy Leverance, and we all talk about gratitude. And I want to tell you a story about gratitude in federal legislatures. I was shopping at my local Harris Teeter one day, and there was my federal representative picking out corn. And he always got a very good marks on voting for AAUW. But I went up to him, I introduced myself, I explained I was from AAUW and I had advocated in his office, and I thanked him profusely for that. And he remembered that because this all has to do with food, I don't know, because I was at a local restaurant and he walked in for a meeting and he came over and he said hello to me and he remembered. So I really believe that thank you notes are wonderful, but if you see the person in person, the legislature, there's nothing wrong with thanking them or even asking them to do something, like the asks that we talked about in previous slides. And I've done that too. So don't be shy, because these people need this connection. They want to make a connection between you and what you're asking. And also, I think in the chat room, there was a question about how long Lobby Corps has been in existence. 1975, I believe. So that's my story. Gratitude. Always thank someone. Always thank the legislature that they've provided a staff member or have signed on to the bill or voted. Gratitude goes a long way. That's it.
Thank you, Marcy. Now we'll introduce Mary Lou.
Hey, thank you. I'm Mary Lou. I am in the McLean area branch in Virginia, and have been thrilled since I retired to be able to make my voice heard. When I found out there was also a volunteer lobby corps, I joined it right away, having been a federal employee where you were very careful about what you had to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I will tell you just a little story about a recent lobbying experience I had. And since, of course, because of COVID and other things, we haven't been on the Hill, I did go with my people from my branch to Richmond, Virginia, while the assembly there was in session. And this was planned by our Virginia state, AAUW. They said, this is what you should be doing. Here are the offices you should go to. And these are a few issues we want to remind those people and introduce ourselves as to what AAUW is in the state of Virginia. So I was lucky, very lucky to have as my partner a woman who was coming from the same area as this particular newly elected delegate, Sproul. Mr. Sproul was his name. And when we went in, he immediately was very friendly, and we went into what AAUW is about because he had never really heard of it. However, my friend knew and brought up the fact that she knows very well a person who's a broadcaster in a city in his district. And she spoke to this broadcaster and he said, oh, yes, this new delegate here is a good guy. So naturally, the delegate was very happy to hear from us. He was smiling all the time. We were on his side. In fact, sometimes if they're sitting there and you walk in, well, he got out of his chair, out of his desk, and came to us. And so we had a really pleasant conversation. after telling one who's AAUW, why are we here? To remind them about AAUW and its issues, and just a few things that are very important to us, after which we said, and what do you think of supporting public education? And yes, we got a very good response from him, and also women's health and also voting rights. So he was eager to please, and he was on our side all the time. And in fact, he was the one who insisted that one of his staff come and take a picture of us. It sort of like turned around, but I think it was a good experience, and very lucky, in fact. And he'll know all about AAUW, and he is very supportive, and I know that he is, of our particular issues in the state of Virginia. So that's the story, and thank God for that connection that my partner had with the person, the broadcaster, who knows the delegate. A great
Thank you.
experience.
Thanks, Mary Lou, and thank you, Marcy. And I'll just finish this slide with saying, as I have said before, you don't have to be an expert on an issue, and you don't have to think that you're going to be giving a speech to the legislator. You may just get an opportunity to say 2 or 3 sentences. And like we have said so often, finding some kind of personal connection to the story, the issue, the legislator, so to remind him that you represent their constituents, can go a long ways to making a successful visit. So I'm going to turn this microphone over to Barbara for the next slide, please.
So there are lots of ways that you can engage with elected officials. We've been focusing mostly today on ways that you can meet with them and have a specific ask or talk to them about specific legislation. But don't overlook other opportunities to meet with them. Sometimes they have in-district meetings where you can, open house or something like that. Or they'll have town halls and you can go there and do those. Or local community events. In fact, in a couple weeks, I am going to a shredding event that is sponsored by my state senator and my state representative. This is a service that they provide for their constituents, and I do have things that need to be shredded, but I will be sure that I go up and say hello to them, and that I will thank them for providing this service, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about a few pieces of legislation, because I know they're both sponsors and support AAUW issues. So, and maybe Becky and Marcy and Mary Lou can tell you about some other, well, Marcy's already told us about meeting her representative in the supermarket. But, there are other opportunities like that. Don't even overlook going to a parade, because they love to participate in parades for community events. Becky?
Those are all good ideas. And I just wanted to make a reminder that we remember, as public citizens, you can speak about any issue that you want, and you can say that you are partisan and have thoughts on things. But if you're going to be lobbying, representing AAUW, you need to be sure that you stick to the AAUW public policies. And those are the issues and the positions that you're going to take. So you need to be careful that you don't get off topic and feel like to the representative that you are taking on positions that are not AAUW issues while you're representing AAUW. Okay. Anything else, Robin, that you would like? I also wanted to say that Capitol Hill Lobby Corps has been on a forced pause due to COVID and the follow-on from the January 6th insurrection, but we're looking forward to starting lobbying again sometime in the near future, because we enjoy doing it so much, and we want to continue to make sure that AAUW and our issues have a presence on Capitol Hill. So thank you.
And I'll just say one more thing to emphasize again, please sign up, get everybody you know to sign up. You don't have to be a member of AAUW to sign up for our 2-minute activist. And what's really great is that automatically, when you get that and decide to follow through on the ask that they're doing, and we just had one came out about the ERA yesterday, that it will automatically personalize it so that you can go, it will go directly to your legislator, which makes it really simple. And you can also add your own comments if you want to the letter that's already been written. So
the 2-minute activist gives you a script, but it's very easy to go down in that script box and personalize it or edit in any way that you think will make it more represent you and your thoughts. You don't have to do that, but you can do that.
Absolutely. Thank you all for giving this really great summary, all of the step-by-step tips and tricks, and then adding your, most importantly, your valuable experience and storytelling to this. Like we talked about, using stories and personal experiences in advocacy is very important. And it's also really important when supporting fellow advocates and activists like today in learning how to expand their own engagement on, okay, well, this is how I did it. Because we all can understand and remember a time when we were a little nervous about approaching a legislator or someone in their office about these issues. So I appreciate all your sharing. We are going to shift to some questions here. They've been coming in consistently. I really appreciate everyone. Remember, you can drop it in the Q&A function and we will get to as many of your questions as possible today. I'm going to start it off here with a question for everyone. Anyone can answer. Has anyone on the panel ever had a bad experience with approaching an elected, or I will add here, or was uncomfortable about how to approach them or how to navigate the conversation? And if so, how did you navigate that? Marcy?
Well, it was, the issue was STEM, and I was in Alabama legislator's office, a federal legislator, and he is very conservative, and he saw my AAUW badge, and he said, "Oh, that really looks liberal to me." And so I thought, well, this should be interesting. But you know, I tried to be charming, and I said, but this should benefit your constituents in Huntsville, where the space station is. And I know they have job openings. My husband's a scientist. And he said, oh, yeah. And so we started talking about the courses one takes, et cetera, et cetera. And then I discovered his wife went to Northwestern University. Well, I'm originally from Chicago. And he invited me into his office, and I just let him talk. Okay, I just filled in things. And it worked out fine. I mean, you know, I don't, but I did contact people in Huntsville to call him. So anyway, so sometimes you just kind of have to listen and, you know, pretend you're at a party and you want to be charming. That's it.
And you have to remember that we're not there to argue. We're there to state our position and to give reasoned, factual information about why we take that position and to listen to what they say. So you're not here to argue back and forth, just to say, this is why AAUW takes this position, why we think it's important. And then again, like Marcy is saying, that personal story can go a long ways to say, explain why this is, why we think this way about a particular issue. You're not going to get into an argument, but if you can just make them think about the issue in a slightly different way, that can be very, very helpful.
Mary Lou?
I just wanted to add that certainly you go into an office and also you're not going into an office that is total zero for 20 years on AAUW issues. That doesn't make any sense. But you can go into an office and it is very cool, and it's if you're not visible or something, and you get no from who's ever in the office. However, you always keep on smiling, and also look to the secretary or the person at the desk and be very, very pleasant, even though there's maybe no connection there or you can't start a conversation, but you can be just pleasant and say, it's been a great day, isn't it? If you see the tulips or something like that.
One thing that I did want to share about what Mary Lou is saying, and that I don't think we really mentioned in this webinar, is that you can make a visit a legislator's office just to share information with them. One thing that we have done, and Capitol Hill Lobby Corps, is share the research reports that AAUW has put out when they match the particular issues that are coming up to the floor, especially things like STEM, especially the college debt issues. We have shared the report about graduating to a pay gap many times. And that one especially is very good, where we talk to the receptionists, who are often recent college graduates, and we can come up with conversations about the factual results of those research reports that help to back up the AAUW position on these particular issues. So that's something to remember. And also, don't be intimidated by going to visit public officials. They are public officials. They work for their constituents, and it's good to remind them again that we're volunteers representing people in their district, and we are speaking on these issues because we care about them, not because we're being paid to represent a special interest. And that really does go a long ways.
Thank you. I really appreciate you touching on that, Becky, and in the presentation as well, with really emphasizing the importance, but also power of being volunteer leaders and approaching elected officials as constituents or on behalf of constituents in the case of the Lobby Corps activities in DC. Because we do have a few different questions in the chat and the Q&A asking after being registered lobbyists and how do you go about being a lobbyist on behalf of AAUW? And like, I just want to clarify a little confusion on what that term is. Like, registered lobbyist is a highly technical term, and that's more like, I'm not even a registered lobbyist for AAUW, and I am on the public policy team. So kind of like push that out of your head a little bit. We're talking about grassroots lobbying, which is advocating on behalf of yourselves, your neighbors, and everyone else around you with an elected official. Let's say like lowercase l lobbying, not official title. So with that, there are a few questions on the technicalities here. So both at Congress, on Capitol Hill and in districts, for Barbara, your experience in your state, do you make an appointment with these offices or do you just show up?
We do both. We have had formal lobby days in Pennsylvania at the state capitol on a particular issue. Most of our lobby days have been on pay equity, and then we ask our members to come to Harrisburg, the capital, and give them all the information they need using the tools from AAUW about how to ask for a meeting. And they set up their meetings and then we provide them with the materials. But I know that my co-chair for public policy for a number of years, who lives in the Harrisburg area, anytime she would be in the Capitol for whatever reason, she would write a note to her legislator and just leave it there with their office, just saying, I was here today. And I just wanted you to know that I stopped by to visit, so that's the best. I think when you're having a formal ask, that's the best thing to do. But there's, you can certainly stop by at their offices, the local offices, and that way you get to know the staff. And they can be your best people, I think, sometimes, because they're the people who will read the legislation. They're the people who are going to recommend things to the legislator. And if you get to know them, that's even better sometimes. Other questions, Robin?
Yeah, there is a related one. Do you, for your purposes out in the States, not in DC, do you have to inform your local AAUW leaders before visiting an elected official?
I think that would be a good idea so that everybody knows what's happening. And besides that, you could get other people to go with you. There's always safety in numbers, and some of those other people may have some of these stories that we've talked about saying to them or telling them. And that can be helpful too. And then since even Becky talked about Lobby Corps, they do 2 people all the time. So it's not just one person.
Right.
And if you have any fear at all after this training, you shouldn't. But if you still have any kind of trepidation about doing this, having another person along can bolster your own confidence about what you can do. Plus, they can sometimes pick up on something that you've said and add to the conversation, And besides that, they like to only have like 15-minute meetings. Sometimes if you get into the topic, sometimes they will take even longer with you because they're interested in what you're saying, especially if they like research and information and really want to know what their constituents think. So you can make a meeting and think that it may only last 15 minutes and wind up being there for half an hour to an hour sometimes, depending on how interested the legislator is in the topic that you're talking about. Becky?
But again, it may just be a few minutes. That's why you need to have a very clear, concise ask when you go in there. Hi, I'm Becky and this is Marcy. And today we're visiting you on behalf of AUW members in City XYZ. And we want to know, will you support ABC? And then give them the letter, which explains your position and says, this is why AUW takes this position. You have to be very concise in your ask and what you want them to respond to. And again, you have to be, why you're there is only because it's part of AUW's public policy priorities. It has to fit in with our education and women's background issues. You're not going to be visiting them on behalf of AUW on things that don't belong to those public policies. And again, like I said, once you've done this before, it's much less intimidating, especially if you end up talking to staffers. It's like talking to your next door neighbor. It's like talking to somebody in the PTA or talking to your kids, because a lot of them are college age. But again, you need to remind yourself, these people are public servants. They're no different than you or me, especially on the issues that you as AUW members know so much about and care very much about.
There are a few different versions of another question here, but I'll use one an example. Does AUW request members to visit members of Congress while they're in district offices? And I will give a very quick answer and then open it up for whoever wants to contribute too. Yes, everything that was shared today isn't just for going to Washington, DC and going to, Capitol Hill, going to Congress. This is for any elected official, all the way, all localities, all levels of elected officials and office. So I recommend taking a look at this. Be like, let me consider approaching my, someone on the school board, or not just the governor's office, but I want to talk to my state representative or state senator about an issue. I want to talk to, literally insert here, elected official. And some folks are asking, how do we as advocates stay busy while elected officials are not at their offices? And I will hazard the guess that our work doesn't stop. So, you don't take a break from this unless you want to, but I would like to open that up for everyone else's perspectives.
Well, I think especially when they're not in session, Pennsylvania, I'm from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania legislators work full time.
Mhm.
That's kind of an oxymoron in a way, because they're only there in Harrisburg 3 days a week. And then there's whole months when they're not there. But then they are in their local offices. So that's another really great time, I think, to meet them where they are, right at home in their own offices. And they will do a lot of things because they only work Monday through Wednesday in Harrisburg, unless there's a committee meeting. So then Thursday and Friday is a good day to see them in their local office. And, I wouldn't overlook that, because again, you're going to make connections with staff at the local offices. And sometimes they have little services that they provide. And when you go in for that service, or call them about that service, then you're making another connection with a staff person.
Speaking of those connections and relationship building, someone asked, they have annual lobby days as a state AUW organization, but should they consider another format, such as sending several small groups for each session?
We've done both. In Pennsylvania, we've had official lobby day, but specifically around a particular issue, not, necessarily on other issues. But especially during COVID, what we did was we tried to get people to focus on a week where they could go and see their or talk to their local officials locally, because they weren't in the Capitol either, because the Capitol was shut down because of COVID. And don't overlook doing Zoom, although
so I have another question here. I want to circle in Mary Lou and Marcy, as well as Becky. How do you stay focused and motivated on continuing to achieve long-term wins? We're looking at the decades of work that we've been doing, decades in the future, and this person says, I'm already tired. Marcy, go for it. It's a great question.
Well, when I applied to dental school in the 1970s, there were quotas for women. Okay, they would only take so many women because God forbid if we should get pregnant. And the way I stay focused now is I look at the percentage of women in dental and medical schools, and it's way up there, and it's probably more than men in some of the specialties. So that's how I stay focused. I think of what happened to me, and then I see these percentages in these professional schools, and I think, well, we did do something and we can do more. That's it.
I definitely agree with Marcy. You have to look at the big picture to think about how much progress has been made on these issues. And, since we were in college, since we started working, whatever, and think about how much better things are. There's still a long ways to go on them, but we have definitely made progress. And getting the legislators I think a lot of AUW's public priority issues are much more in the public view and have gotten a lot more positive feedback and buy-in on a lot wider audience than they were in years past. So we are making progress, and you just have to keep at it till you get there. And we have made lots of progress.
I want to express my firm belief that is behind and gives me the basis for why I lobby. And that is, if I'm there, or many of us are there on a particular day about a particular issue, walk the hall, go into the office, talk with a couple of people, maybe not, and give them the handouts. And then if it's sort of we haven't seemed to make an impact, so we're very pleasant and we leave. However, if I didn't do that, no one else would have done that. So I add to that experience to take the space in that office and the sound in that office to give the message of supporting AAUW issues. And if I didn't do that day, nobody would have. So.
And I think we have to remember that legislation and getting new legislation and new laws passed, it is not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And if you're not in it for the marathon, then yeah, it can be frustrating. But that's, you make little bits of progress.
Absolutely. I want to contribute two responses to this before we get to our last question. And then I saw someone else from Lobby Corps hopped in with an answer in the Q&A as well, which was one of my answers. So the first one being exactly that, it's incremental. And what's really important is to do exactly this, to come together and be with others, and there's strength in unity, both with impact, but also with strengthening ourselves. Like, it's helpful to be in a group. And I see Sandra from Lobby Corps said, many of us will get together afterwards in the cafeteria to discuss how the lobbying went that day. And that was such a morale booster. And that kind of segues into my second answer that I routinely will bring up when talking to advocates and any kind of advocacy training, that taking care of yourself is really important. And if you're tired, taking a step back is okay. Like this, we're looking at such a marathon that most of us cannot relentlessly do this every single day without breaking, without taking a break. And you can, that is all right. Then you come back recharged, and we'll be really excited to see you. So I just want to end on that self-care note there with that question. So that said, we're close to time here. I want to ask a final question. If anyone wants to share, one or two sentences on what you want to make sure folks leave today with, what sentiments you want them to remember.
You can do this. And with AAUW's materials, believe me, you know more about this subject, whatever it is, than the legislator does or their staff. And so, be confident in the AAUW information that you have, because it's fact-based and it's good.
It's very good, and the legislators will be happy to hear from you on these issues in light of all the other issues that they often hear from that are nowhere near this informative and positive. So it's good to remind them that governing is not always making lots of noise. It's doing the background and doing the legwork for the long term to make things better.
Any final thoughts, Mary Lou or Marcy? We're good. Yeah.
Oh, I would just say, just show up and do it. It's so important. And also you feel really good afterwards that you've done something.
Yeah.
And have fun with it. I mean, this may be serious, but have fun with it. You would be surprised how good you feel about it, and how people in the offices, most of them are very kind. So have fun with it.
Absolutely. That is a great ending sentiment, Marcy. I hope everyone learned from today, will utilize our resources in the future, and will have fun with their grassroots lobbying. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.